Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show, and welcome to another weird comic review. This one is for, or at least this video is intended for those of you with children, grandchildren, nephews, nieces. Maybe you do some babysitting or something like that. But do any of you guys remember these giant size Marvel Treasury editions? This is actually a DC Treasury edition comic book. They're giant. I don't have an actual regular comic book here handy to give you an idea, but they're freaking huge. When I was a little guy, I loved these. My parents could pick these up at Gemco and Kmart and places like that. And the thought occurred to me that a lot of us are we've got kids in our lives, like I said, grandchildren, children, and the idea of passing down the joy of reading comic books is getting harder and harder to do with the price and the availability, and now they're such collector's items and blah blah blah. But it occurred to me that maybe some of you still might like to read a comic book to the children in your lives, and especially us older folks who reading might be a little more difficult. Sorry about the dog. Let me just take care of that real quick. And these would make the perfect gateways to get those little ones into comics and for story time. Maybe you're tired of Goodnight Moon and things like that, and maybe you might want to read a little Tarzan, or for some of my other fans out there, Conan the Barbarian. I've got a few of these. I'm going to show a couple of them off in just a moment. But they're really big. They're a little sturdier than the comic books of the day, because they have a thicker cover. But they're big. They're easier to read for us folks who might actually need readers, and you don't have to feel so old, and you can actually see the big print, and you can have the children follow along and show them the stories and the images. Conan might not be the ideal choice for that, but for those of you who do remember these, maybe you remember, I think it was Superman versus Muhammad Ali. I don't have that one yet. There's actually a really great one, The Land of Oz, which is the #1 issue of Treasury edition. But let's go through a couple other odd choices I thought I'd pull out and share with you, including one that's just in here for other reasons. You got classic Star Wars #1. There's actually 3 of these, even though the comic book was 6 issues, I believe. But I've got 1 and 2. I do not have 3. I actually picked both of #1 and 2 up for $20 at, I want to say, Wizard Con in downtown Orange County somewhere, with my late friend Ron, who passed away. So they're kind of, it's a little sentimental for me. It was one of the last times we got to hang out. But there's #2 of Star Wars. And if your kids are Star Wars fans, you got that going. Now, mind you, some of these are pretty expensive. I don't know why I have this Batman in here, Batman War. But it came out in the same size, and I was recently bagging and boarding these with new bags, which are not easy to find. But there's Marvel Treasury Edition #15, another Conan with Red Sonja. So maybe if you've got a granddaughter, you want her to appreciate that. And then I saved the best for last. Good old Howard the Duck. Maybe you could pull that off without feeling weird about reading Howard the Duck. But I thought these would be great for reading to the little ones. Maybe get them into the hobby, and maybe help them learn to read themselves. That's how a lot of my friends actually learn to read, is through comic books. And it's a great way to pass on the tradition and the hobby. And when they get older and they understand to be a little more careful with these old issues, that some of these are still going to be $10-15, but like I said, if you're tired of Goodnight Moon and Winnie the Pooh and some of that other stuff, and your kid's already into I don't know, Transformers or watching Spider-Man or things like that, there's a whole slew of different things to choose from, the Hulk, etc. And all by the great classic artists. A lot of them are just reprints of things from that era, and it's a great way to be able to get some of those great old stories Shazam was one of my favorites, the Shazam family. I had that one. I'm still looking for it. But, you know, there's roughly about 50 of them to choose from back in the day. And who knows, maybe it'll inspire the little ones in your family to pick up the hobby, to have an interest in reading comic books, or, you know, reading something besides, you know, kiddie books, etc. You know, make them feel like they're, you know, big kids growing up and all that. And I don't know, let me know what you guys think. I'm going to keep this one short, and I will see you guys again in the funny papers. And until then, happy trails.